Today, I'm very excited because we have a special guest. We have Keith from the very popular YouTube channel, English Speaking Success. And Keith will be sharing his best tips and advice to help you feel confident speaking in any situation. Welcome, Keith. It's so wonderful to have you here.
Hi, Jennifer. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me to come along. I'm very excited to share some ideas with you and all the students watching.
Oh, that's wonderful. Now, Keith, every day I get messages from my students telling me that they can read in English, they can write in English, but they can't speak. They're struggling with their speaking, especially with native speakers. So,
Mhm.
what do you think? Why are so many students struggling with their speaking skills?
I guess it goes back to our educations at school. I think where a lot of people learn English is at school, and there, because the classes are so big, then teachers tend to focus on reading skills and writing skills. We discover English through books. We read it. We analyze the language, maybe do a bit of listening practice, but very rarely do speaking practice. So I guess a lot of students over the years learning English, they don't actually get a chance to practice speaking. And I think then when the time comes to speak, they just don't have the confidence because they've not practiced that. I think with any skill, if you haven't practiced it and you suddenly have to do it, then it's quite nerve wracking, and you lose your confidence, and then you can go down this vicious cycle going downwards. So I think, yeah, it's to do with that. I think it's the background of learning English, not enough focus on speaking practice.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and that is the one thing I hear from students a lot is, "I want to speak, but I don't have the opportunity."
Mm.
And you mentioned something about that fear they get because they don't have the exposure, so I hear that a lot from students. They're afraid of making grammar mistakes, or a big one is they're afraid of being judged by native speakers because of their accent or their English, so what advice would you have for these students who are struggling with those feelings of fear and nervousness?
Mm. I think when it comes to fear, I mean, I don't know what you think, but I think a lot of native speakers are not so judgmental. They won't. They're very rarely going to correct your grammar, because most native speakers may not know how, how to do that. So they're probably not going to correct your grammar. They won't correct your accent or laugh at your accent. I think by and large, most native speakers are kind of open minded with that and are not going to have a problem with that. I think where the problem comes is where, if because of your grammar mistakes or your accent or pronunciation, communication breaks down and they don't understand what you're trying to say, then yes, there's going to be a problem. And they'll be like, oh, well, I don't want to speak to them. I can't communicate with them. And so there is that problem that if communication breaks down, um, but communication can break down in different situations, right? It can break down due to mistakes, but it can also break down if you just go quiet or
Mm.
speak slowly. Some students don't want to make a mistake, so they go very slowly and they do each word by word, and then communication breaks down because the listener is not following what you're saying or is getting bored and walks away. So I think there's a balance between the accuracy and the fluency. You don't want to be thinking too much about your mistakes. Just try and communicate. Just speak out. Go with the flow. But be aware that if you are making a lot of mistakes, you'll see it in the eyes of the listener that the communication is broken down. So you need that kind of balance of just speaking out, going with the flow, but being aware you're not making too many mistakes, grammatically, vocabulary, or pronunciation mistakes. So that balance is an important one.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because if you're just focused on making mistakes, you're forgetting that you're talking to someone because of an idea you're sharing or a conversation you're having. So you should really be focusing more on that. And you mentioned that, of course, you do need to have the fluency, have the grammar, have the vocabulary. So, how do you balance the need to focus on these technical English skills like grammar, vocabulary, but then also get the exposure, also get the practice, the speaking practice?
Oh, that's a very good question. How do you balance both of those? I think it does, as you say, it comes through practice. There are different kinds of practice that you can do. There's practice you can do on your own, where you're just listening and repeating and listening and repeating, and maybe making up some sentences. And there you can focus much more on the accuracy because you're on your own, you're at home, maybe you're recording yourself, and you just practice repeating, making up sentences. You can record and listen back and focus on getting accurate. But then on the other hand, you've got practice where you're engaging with other people and where you're communicating your idea. And that's your chance really to focus on that kind of communication rather than the grammar, vocabulary. Just get your idea across, and try and it's hard to do, but be comfortable with the level that you're at. I think a big frustration with a lot of students, especially IELTS students, is they try to be at a higher level more quickly when they're not ready. And so you're trying to use complex language and you're making more mistakes. Whereas if you come back to your level and try and speak at the level that you're at as well as you can, you're going to improve your fluency with the language that you know. So I think there's that happening as well.
Yeah, you raised a great point. I love what you said about that balance because if you spend time doing both, you have the structured practice where you're focusing on that accuracy, but then you have the practice where you're focusing on just conversation and communicating. Now, what would you say to that student who wants to sound more advanced in English, but their fluency isn't there yet? What should they do? Just focusing on the words that they now know, or should they focus on trying to add more words? What strategies do you have for that student?
It has to be both of those. I think it has to be in conversations. Focus on the fluency, focus on using the words that you know, and because if you're using language you're comfortable with, you're going to feel more confident, and you're going to be speaking more fluently. In the background, of course, you always need to be studying and learning, expanding your vocabulary, the grammar that you use up to a higher level. So you always want to be curious to learn new language and to grow the level that you're at. Um, so you need both of those activities. And I kind of make it sound like they're two separate activities. And by and large, they may be, but they may be intermingled. You may be having a conversation with someone and they use an expression you've never heard. And you say, well, that's interesting. And then at the end of the conversation, you just make a note and say, oh, I must remember that. It's really good. So they may be intermingled, but I think you need to do both things.
Yeah, that's great advice. And in reality, that sounds like how we would learn basically anything or improve any skill. Because if you're going to the gym, you focus on the exercises you know, but every day you might try to push yourself a little bit more, run a little longer, or lift heavier weights. And it's just always a gradual process and basically everything that we do in improving.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I love the comparison to the gym. I think a lot of the English workout practice is like being at a gym, right? Repetitions and repetitions, but then you increase the weight, you're increasing the complexity of the vocabulary, maybe, but not too much, step by step.
Yeah, exactly. And there's this concept with working out that if you're not uncomfortable, if you don't feel the pain, then you're not really working out. You're not pushing your body, you're doing things too easy. Now, a lot of students they say that, "Oh, speaking is so uncomfortable. I feel awkward. I feel embarrassed." But is that feeling of discomfort or that awkwardness, do you think that's just a natural part of speaking or do you think that something is wrong if you do feel uncomfortable when you're speaking?
Such a good question. I think there are going to be situations where you feel uncomfortable. Like as you said, with any activity, if you're pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, sometimes that's the only way to get better, right? As you
Mhm.
said with the gym, if you're lifting 5 kilos every day, you're never going to get stronger. Some point you have to, I wouldn't call it pain, but I would call it pushing yourself a little bit. And then yeah, you're going to feel a bit uncomfortable. But then the more you do that, you get relaxed again, um, and then you go through the cycle again. Like when you start a new job, first day you're a bit nervous, you're not comfortable, but as you speak to people, get to know a few people, you feel more relaxed. Then you meet some more people you don't know, a bit nervous, and then you get more comfortable. So you go through that cycle. I think it's perfectly good and fine to feel a bit uncomfortable some of the time, but I think when you're if so long as you've got enough situations where you feel comfortable with English, then that's also good. I mean, I think as you've mentioned earlier, enjoying your English and your study is so important. And you want to feel relaxed a lot of the time, but maybe sometimes you're pushing the envelope a bit.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and end off this gym analogy, you don't wanna be in constant pain the whole time, but at some points during your 1 hour at the gym, you want to push yourself a little bit. So I love how you talk about that balance. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing that. Now, you shared with me before we began this interview that you live in Spain, you have learned Spanish for a very long time. So tell us, what's it like for you when you go out and speak Spanish as a second language, as your non-native language with native speakers? Do you have any feelings of nervousness or discomfort? Do you have situations where you pause and your mind goes blank? Just share your personal experience and some perhaps things that you've done to help you communicate better.
Right. Well, when I go out into the big Spanish world and I speak Spanish, I'm fairly comfortable most of the time. And especially with people I know, like, so I live in the countryside. So the neighbors around here, we say hello every day, we have a chat, feel perfectly comfortable. Go to the local shop, I feel fine. But interestingly, if I go to a new shop, like a new greengrocers or a new butcher's, um, and especially that situation where you're in a queue and everybody's waiting, and then you've got people behind you, and the pressure is like the whole world is watching you. I do get nervous in Spanish,
Mm.
and I find that quite difficult. I find understanding fine, but speaking out sometimes I hesitate. I think I think what goes through my mind is that yeah, it's kind of they're gonna know that I'm not a Spanish person, um, and then that makes me a bit nervous. But as a friend said to me early on, they said, "But Keith, when they look at your face, they know you're not Spanish, even before you speak. So what are you worried about?" I thought, okay, yeah, that's true. So I do sometimes get nervous. I tell you what I do when I go into conversations like at parties with people, um, is against my nature, which is quite introverted, I become deliberately extrovert and I just go and speak to people and start controlling the conversation. So I just go in and start talking and talking and talking, and then let the conversation develop. Because what I noticed is if I don't do that, I end up listening to people. The more I listen, the more nervous I get. The less I speak, the less confidence I have. Whereas if I jump in first without even thinking and just start speaking, I feel a bit more confident. And then also the other people can work out my level of Spanish and go, okay, he's okay, but he's not great. We need to adapt a bit to him. And I try and do that. That's my strategy for controlling my feelings in a conversation, if that
That
makes sense.
Well, that's a great tip and congratulations because that's not easy to do when you're a self-proclaimed introvert as well to just
Mm.
get out there and start a conversation that takes a lot of bravery. So, for all the
Mm.
students watching, I hope you find inspiration in that. I certainly do. So, great job with that, Keith.
Yeah, it's not easy. But with
No.
practice, it's something I've practiced and I've just come to do. Yeah.
And I'm sure the first 30 seconds are the
Mm,
worst. But then
mm.
once the conversation is going, it's probably like, okay, you can relax and just focus on the conversation.
Yes. We fear the unknown, don't we? And so as
Exactly.
soon as you break that barrier, then it's better.
Exactly. Now
Mm.
let's shift a little and talk about the IELTS because I know this is something that you help your students prepare for on your YouTube channel. And I know that there are many students watching right now who are preparing either for their IELTS right now or in the future.
Mm.
So let's start with just a basic IELTS question, and
Okay.
we'll expose students to an IELTS question. So I know probably the first question they might ask you is, and I want you to answer as if this were the IELTS. So I'll ask you, so Keith, where are you from?
Manchester.
Manchester. Okay. Manchester. Now, is that actually a good answer for the IELTS?
No, sorry, that's a terrible answer, isn't it? That's a terrible answer. Yeah, I think the first golden rule of IELTS is don't give one word answers, right? Like yes or no. Um, a much better answer would be I'm from Manchester, which is in the north of England, maybe 2 hours from London by train.
Ah, okay. So you have your answer, which of course is where you're from, Manchester, but then you put it in a full sentence. But
Mm.
then I really like what you did there. You added on
Mhm.
a fact about
Mm.
Manchester. So what's the strategy there? You take your simple answer, you put it in a full sentence, and then what do you do after that?
You've hit the nail on the head. You take your answer, you make it into a sentence, and then you add an extra bit of information,
Mm,
something that maybe is natural that you might say to somebody, um, and yeah, you keep it short and concise because at the beginning of the test, what they call
mhm.
part one, you want like 2 or 3 sentence answers.
Okay.
You don't want to give the history of Manchester, right, and bore the examiner, but
Okay.
just yeah, develop your answer a little bit like that. Mm.
Okay. And what is another question they would ask you in part 1?
So they might ask you, do you work or do you study?
Okay. Okay, well,
Let's
let's
do it.
see how you answer this for the IELTS, and everyone think about how you would answer and then follow tips or follow Keith's tips and follow the structure that he uses after to practice your answer. Okay, Keith. So, do you work or do you study?
Well, I work. I'm a full time teacher and I give online lessons to students around the world who want to learn English.
Oh, very nice. So your answer is of course I work, and then you put that in your full sentence, and then you provide a an add-on. What would you call that? An
Add on.
add-on?
I like that. An add on. That's very nice. Yes, I think I'll steal that if I can. An add on.
An
I call it like
add-on.
extra information, but I prefer add on.
Yeah. I have to be honest, Keith. I find that this strategy would be really helpful for even native speakers because at the end of the day, I'll go down and my husband and I usually have a coffee around 4 o'clock, and I'll say, "Oh, so how was your day?" And guess what he usually says?
Fine.
It was good. Fine.
Yeah.
Good. And it's like,
And
seriously?
you're like, come
You
on.
just we haven't seen each other in 8 hours, and all I
Mm.
get is good. So let's imagine let's imagine that you're a student. This could be for the IELTS or even just socially, and someone asks you a simple question like, "How was your weekend?" What would you say could be a good answer to that question?
I had a really good weekend, actually. I was at home on Saturday. I didn't do very much, but actually on Sunday, I washed the car because it was getting so dirty. And now it's spick and span.
Oh, I love
Ooh.
that. And everyone, think of conversations you even have in your native language and how you might just answer very short answers. But how can you have a conversation with someone when they just say good? So, again, Keith, do you want to walk students through maybe some strategies that they can use to provide these fuller, more complete answers?
Yeah, I think, I mean, before I do, I'm going to add to what you said because it's
Sure.
really important. I think that some students think IELTS is like a formal academic exam that you need special English. It's not. It's a
Mhm.
test of your natural spoken English. So you just want to speak naturally as you would to a friend over coffee, or as you would in any kind of a meeting somebody you don't know at a party. It's the same kind of language. And as you said, Jennifer, the idea of communicating at work or at a party socially, make it easier for people, right? Give
Mhm.
them a bit more language, something that they, or ideas that they can talk about. And I think it's the same with the IELTS test. So I think as students developing your answer, there are three parts to IELTS. In part one, give short answers, maybe 2 to 3 sentences. Be direct, right? If they say, "Where are you from?" don't make it a mystery and make them guess. Just say, "Dum, I'm from New Delhi," and then add a bit more. Um, I think what's more challenging is in part three of the test, it becomes a deeper conversation. So it's more abstract. They may ask you about the development of cities in the last 20 years. You know,
Mm.
how have they changed? And there you want to not only answer and develop your answer, but I think that my tip would be to give an example. And through your example, you can show off more language and give a longer answer. So I don't know if you're talking about cities developing, you can say nowadays cities have a lot of bus lanes, especially for the bus, and they have digitalized bus schedules. For example, in New York, they've got da, 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 and you go into the details of a specific example. That can be a strategy.
Yeah, that's a really great strategy. And like we were talking about, the strategy won't just help you for your IELTS. So this isn't wasted time just to get a piece of paper that says you passed your IELTS. This is how strategies to help you communicate in meetings or parties or even with your husband and your family, like I just gave, to make more meaningful conversation or more connection with people as well.
Yeah, it's all about communication. The more you focus on communication, the better. Don't with IELTS, don't get wrapped up in fancy advanced vocabulary. Just focus on communication as much as you can and make it natural.
Now, so on your IELTS though, so they're not judging you based on, oh, you must use the past perfect in order to get a high score. It's just if it naturally, the sentence structure requires the past perfect, you use it, but you don't have to use certain grammar or certain vocabulary. It's just natural communication.
That is a very, very, very good way of expressing it. Yes, it's very much that. To get a high score, if you look at the examiner's description of a high score, it is, for example, a band 8, use a wide range of simple and complex grammar,
Mm.
but it has to be situation specific. So if you're just rolling off the past perfect without it being the correct tense at that time, then it's a big cross. But if you're using it because it's the right moment for that situation to use it, it's great. But if you never use the past perfect, you can still get a band 9, the top score. They're not ticking off all the different tenses. It's situation specific, So if you're talking about an event that happened before something in the past, voila, you need your past perfect. Um, but if you're just trying to squeeze it in somehow, it doesn't work.
Well, I hope that brings some relief to students and that it is just natural communication. So, thank you for sharing that, Keith. And I know your channel has many resources to help students prepare. So, for of course, all my students can check all those individual lessons and resources out. Now, I want to ask you just more generally, whether it's for the IELTS, a job interview, a presentation, do you have any specific strategies that students can use to practice and prepare, especially since students are probably thinking, I don't have anyone to practice with. I
Mm.
live in a country where there are no native speakers. So, how can these students practice their speaking skills if they don't have anyone to practice with? Do you have any specific advice or resources?
Sure. I think there are two different things you can do. One is you can practice on your own where you're kind of listening and repeating and try and make up different sentences. Actually, in my this is going to sound like an advert, but it's not. In my online courses, we use something called the Speaking Success System. And it's a series of videos with me where I talk you through using different grammar and vocabulary and getting you to change the word, change the tense, and make it slightly different so that you're practicing, but with a video, you're just repeating, but you're thinking about the words that you're using. And it's a really nice way to practice. And you can use that to build up your confidence in your language. On the other hand, you also, if you can, practice with other people, because when you're speaking in conversation, that's where you've got the etiquette of communication, right? How do you interrupt people? How do you take turns? How do you listen? How do you ask? All of that. And then practice that. I think, I don't know. I mean, this sounds a bit harsh, but nowadays there's no excuses, right? If you go on the internet, there are so many places you can connect with other, maybe not native speakers, but other people practicing and speaking from around the world. There are a lot of them are free as well. And I know sometimes they're challenging, that it's not the perfect experience, but often it's better than nothing. And even if it doesn't work the first time, I think you need to keep trying and trying and try again, because you may have one bad experience where somebody wasn't very friendly, but it's just once. And maybe try different areas, different places. But I think, yeah, get on the internet and push yourself out of your comfort zone, right? Often that's the block. It's like, oh my God, I'm too nervous. I can't do that. I can't speak to anybody. um, just try once, and then that's it, never again. But then try again and try again and try again. Keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. I love how you said that, and I agree. It's not harsh with the resources we have today. There are no excuses. So get out there and, like you said, just push yourself a little bit as well. Now, you've already provided so many tips and resources, and your channel is filled with them as well. But Keith, just to make this very practical for my students, if my students were only to do one thing, just one thing this week to improve their English speaking skills, what should that one thing be?
I'm tempted to say go to my YouTube channel, English Speaking Success, but I won't.
No, you absolutely can and should. Your channel
You
is
can and should.
amazing, and that's why I have you here.
But I'm thinking something more long term. I think what's really important is making a plan,
Mhm.
right? If you want to do one thing today to help your speaking in the next month, sit down and make a very simple plan of how you're going to do that. Think about how many days a week you can study or practice. Is it an hour each time or half an hour? Which days, and what time? I mean, really detail. Just write down the day and the time. This is what I'm going to do, and go into detail about what you're going to do. So rather than saying, I'll watch a YouTube video, you say, I'm going to watch this YouTube video and I'm going to practice repeating or practice shadowing, and have that plan just for 2 weeks. Just make a simple plan for 2 weeks, and then you can review after 2 weeks. Because I know what happens, and this happens to me. If I make a very simple plan and think, okay, I'll decide what to do when it's time for class, I sit down for my study time and I think, right, what am I going to do? And you start searching YouTube, and then 20 minutes later, you haven't started. And so if you get prepared beforehand, even half an hour making your plan with detail, once you go into your plan and it's time to study English, boom, you go straight in, make the use of that time, and and it's much better.
I completely agree with that. Excellent advice. And just to bring it full circle, I'll bring back our gym analogy, because if you were
Oh,
to go to the gym, but you didn't have a plan, you walk in, there's all this equipment. You'll probably waste so much time just trying to decide what to do, how long you should do it, what weight you should use. But if you know exactly what you're going to do when you get there, it will save you time and you'll get better results. So I completely agree with that.
And
piece of
I
advice
love
you
how
offered.
you tied it back to the gym. Well done. Nice.
Somehow it just naturally came back, I felt. Well,
Brilliant.
thank you so much for being here. And everyone, please go to Keith's channel. It's an amazing resource to help you improve for your IELTS and all areas of your English as well. So thank you again so much for being here today, Keith.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, Jennifer. Thank you guys for watching. Really do appreciate it. And maybe our paths will cross in the future.